Welcome to the Red Raiders pregame show presented by UMC. I'm your host, Nicholas Talbot. Today I'm joined by Don Williams. We're going to be breaking down the matchup between Texas Tech and Sam Houston State this weekend. Don, big question on everyone's mind, of course, is who's going to be starting quarterback. Cliff Kingsbury hasn't exactly been forthcoming about who's going to be starting. What are your opinions on who he should start, and why has he kind of gone back on this decision?
Well, I think all signs point toward Patrick Mahomes being the starting quarterback. Now, most of the preseason practice is closed, but there are 7 or 8 opportunities when the first 20 minutes of the practice are open, and Patrick was always working with the first team each of those days, each of those instances that we got to see. And if that's not enough, I think it also kind of dovetails with what Cliff Kingsbury's handling of quarterbacks has been in the past, which is he has stuck with the hot hand until that hot hand turns cold on him. If you think back a couple of years ago, Baker Mayfield started the first 5 games, and Baker Mayfield struggled, so he put in Davis Webb. Davis Webb was immediately good for a couple of games, so he stuck with Davis Webb through 5 games, and then he went back to Mayfield. So again, all indications are that it's Patrick Mahomes. Now, as to why Cliff Kingsbury is not named a starting quarterback, and I don't think we'll see him, we won't know definitively until someone trots out there on Saturday night. It's just the culture of college football in general, which is coaches are college football coaches are secretive, they're paranoid, and they don't want to give away any tiny little thing that they think might help the other team. And again, it's not just Cliff Kingsbury; it's this way all over college football these days. Now it's suddenly fashionable to keep people guessing who your starting quarterback is going to be, which has always puzzled me, because whenever you ask a coach on the team that you're covering, how much difference does it make not knowing who the other team's starting quarterback is going to be, or not knowing whether this running back is going to play against you on Saturday? Inevitably, the answer is, it doesn't affect our preparation one bit. We just keep preparing to do things how we do them. So it's a little bit of coaches talking out both sides of their mouth. It's
kind of the Bill Belichick approach. It's kind of stormed out there in Alabama too with Nick Saban, and it's kind of gone throughout college football from there. Yeah,
it's pervasive. I mean, Sam Houston State, not 100% sure who their quarterback is going to be. They return the starter, Jared Johnson, who last year threw for 3,400 yards and ran for 999. You'd think, okay, he's the automatic starter, but they have a transfer from UAB. And you look on their depth chart this week, and the quarterback is Jared Johnson, or the guy who's the transfer from UAB. They haven't named their starter either.
All right, you bring up Sam Houston State, a very strong FCS school. Some interesting storylines there, too, including the return of Derek Edwards at Texas Tech. Yeah,
it's a whole bunch of interesting storylines, much more so than what you normally get for a season opener against an FCS team. You mentioned Derek Edwards, who was a wide receiver for the Red Raiders, who played here the first 3 years of his college career. I guess it was 3 years of his college career, and he was a big-time recruit, 4-star recruit, and it never really worked out for him. I talked to him earlier today, and he said, I never really got a chance to shine at Texas Tech because of Eric Ward. But with that said, though, he said, I had the misfortune of coming along at the time of the Eric Ward. He said, the Eric Ward. And he said, now, because he's, he just put him on a pedestal, thought he was a great wide receiver, and said everything that I am now is because of what I learned from Eric Ward. Again, Derek, things just didn't work out for him here. Never caught a whole bunch of passes, never really was firmly in the 2 deep for any extended period of time. Goes down to Sam Houston State, caught about 30 balls last year, and he's really excited to be coming back to Lubbock for Saturday's game. But it's more than just that, because Sam Houston State, we all know they were 11-5 last year, if you've looked at them at all. But you look at that roster, and this is a team that's loaded with a ton of transfers from major colleges. They have about 24 guys who have played in the FBS before they went to Sam Houston State. And that includes transfers from Tech, Texas, Texas A&M, Baylor, TCU, Cal, Boise State, Colorado, Wake Forest, just on and on. So this is, some FCS teams, you go in thinking, okay, they're going to be intimidated by 60,000 people. No, because about a third of the guys on their team started their college careers playing in stadiums like this. So again, it's a lot more interesting matchup, I think, than you get with most FCS teams. And I'll tell you what, Texas Tech beat Central Arkansas only 42-35 last year, and UCA was 7-5, if I remember correctly, the year before that. So if Tech does not open up playing better than it did in the season opener last season against UCA, this could be a real unpleasant Saturday afternoon at Jones Stadium.
All right, and a lot of people that think it could make it unpleasant is the defense. Obviously, everyone wants that to change. It could be changed now under David Gibbs. What are you looking from this defense to improve under Gibbs, and how much progress can they actually make?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. The calling card with David Gibbs, and maybe this is on us for kind of looking at his resume and seeing what jumps out. And the thing that jumps out, of course, that we've talked about ad nauseum since January is how many turnovers and takeaways these guys at the University of Houston got the last 2 years. 2 years ago, they got 43. Last year, they got 30. And that 73 over a 2-year period was the most in the FBS, and actually the most in the FBS by quite a few. And it's not coincidental, or it's not just apparently blind luck, because he coaches guys to strip the football and he plays zone coverage on pass defense. So when you're playing man-to-man, guys are tracking the receivers with their eyes, and versus zone coverage, you're kind of playing an area, waiting for guys to come into your area, but meanwhile you're looking at the quarterback's eyes and seeing, okay, where's the ball coming out? Where's that pass going to go? And that tends to yield more interceptions. So that's what David Gibbs said. Gibbs says he's not. When I talked to him back in March, he said, I'm not 100% sure that you'll get a whole bunch of fumbles immediately. We should, because of the way our defensive scheme, the interceptions, though, should go up, just with the way he calls defenses and kind of helps out the defensive backs, plays that coverage. And, again, he said that, will it happen overnight with all the fumbles and all these takeaways? Probably not. It'll take a while, but he thinks they'll eventually get there. Now, and I'm kind of like you. He said, how much can they realistically expect to improve? I'm kind of, everybody in August always talks about how much better they are this year, and how everybody's in great shape. Everybody's on the same page. The new coordinator's always better than the old coordinator. He always has better ideas. It's been that way for 8 years now, and you know what? A lot of times it still doesn't really amount to much results-wise. So I'm kind of, until you show me, I'm not really convinced. And to his credit, David Gibbs says the same thing. We try to, trying to pump him for information. Who's looking good, Coach? What in your linebacker group? Who's standing out? In your defensive backs? Who's standing out? And he's always said, I'm not one to name names. Really, I don't like to name names, because until you go do it on Saturday, it's just talk. So, and I kind of like that approach.
Yeah, I really like David.
Because, Tech people have heard just talk for a lot of years now on how the defense is going to be better.
Gibbs seems to be a real straight shooter. The question, of course, though, that you posed is, can they force more turnovers? Because that was a big weak point last year, where they just weren't forcing them, especially in key moments when they could have used them.
Yeah, it has been for a couple of years now. Again, the thing that one of the statistical things that jumps out to me is Tech last year had 34 takeaways on the defense. The last 2 years, Tech's defense had 34 takeaways combined. Well, the last 2 years at Houston, David Gibbs' starting safeties, 2 guys had 28 takeaways between them. 2 starting safeties for U of H the last 2 years had nearly as many takeaways as the entire Tech defense combined in that same time frame.
All right, who can make that next step to actually beat those key and take those keepaways? Is it someone like a Nigel Beth, who has all the speed in the world, or is it the dependable leader that Keenan Ward has become?
Well, I kind of go back to what I just said. The guys who seem to benefit most from David Gibbs' scheme the last couple of years were his 2 safeties. Those guys had 18 interceptions and 10 fumble recoveries in 13 and 14. So if it's kind of because of scheme, then you think, okay, maybe Keenan Ward is the guy who stands to benefit the most. And I think that's logical too, because he got a year under his belt as the starter last year, so he's comfortable playing Big 12 football. So maybe he's the guy who I kind of look for, maybe to have to benefit from the takeaways. And maybe a guy like Ja'Shawn Johnson also, who is a first-time starter, but he's a guy who had was hugely productive as a high school senior at Ennis. So possibly him. And then, of course, I think the other thing they're counting on is getting pressure on the passer, and so they're expecting another big year out of Pete Robertson, and I think bigger numbers out of Brandon Jackson at the other end.
All right. Now that we've covered the defense, do you think it'll actually play out on the field, and how are the Red Raiders going to do this weekend?
Again, to me, it's kind of a hard game to call. And I know just a few moments ago I spent a lot of time talking up Sam Houston State's FBS experience and some guys who kind of jump out at you. But at the same time, you can look back at last year and say, okay, Sam Houston State last year went to LSU and lost 56-0. And so, clearly there's still that difference in level, in talent level. Sam Houston State's top players, obviously they were all recruited to FBS schools, so they're pretty legit, I think. I'm not sure how good they are, though, from top to bottom on the roster. But then again, Texas Tech is not LSU either. So I tend to think this will be a game that could very well be close for a half, could be close for 3 quarters, and if they don't beat themselves, if they don't commit turnovers and penalties and whatnot, as they've been wont to do for these last couple of years, then maybe Tech pulls away 4th quarter and wins this thing like, 45-28, 45-31. But like I say, I wouldn't be at all surprised if this game winds up very much like it did last year against UCA. And if they don't give a better effort than they did against UCA, could be the first loss that Tech's had to an FCS school since back in 1988 when North Texas came in here and won.
Yeah, that was a close game with a 29-24, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And
the main point that I see coming out here is protecting the football and getting those turnovers. And that's a lot of the reason we think Patrick Mahomes might be named the starters, because he didn't have those same turnover problems. I see the same game so much the way you do, probably 49-24. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us on the Red Raiders pregame show presented by UMC, and we'll see you to the game.